Hey everybody, it's Ohio_bass. And what we'll talk about today in this video is fishing topwater frogs for bass. And to me, this is absolutely the most exciting way to fish for bass. And what I'll do in this video is I'll kind of start with the fundamentals and the basics. And then throughout the video, I'll kind of sprinkle in some tips and some tricks of what I've learned fishing topwater frogs. So hopefully at any skill level, you'll learn something and have the experience of being able to cast out your frog, have it just sit there minding its own business, and just like a great white on Shark Week, watch it come up and just smash the bait, come out of the water. It's absolutely the most exciting strike in bass fishing. And once you experience that, you'll get hooked, just like me. So I put frogs into like two different categories. There's a popper style frog, and then there's what I call a running style frog. And I use them both in different situations, and I fish them both differently. So the popper style frog, just like a normal popper, has a cup mouth, and you can see that there. And that does a couple different things. So when you're twitching this through the water, obviously it's going to create a splash when it goes like this. It's going to spit up water, and that's going to make noise. And noise is the second thing. The noise is more of like a low gurgle, like a bloop, 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 bloop. And what that does, it helps get their attention. It'll draw bass from further distances away to see what's going on. And when you're fishing frogs in general, the bass might not necessarily know that they're going to strike a frog. All they see is something in the water causing a disturbance. So it could be a frog, or it could be an injured baitfish, it could be a snake, it could be a mouse. And since bass, they don't have hands. They can't come up and just feel this thing and see, hey, this is a frog. The only way they know what it is if they eat it or put it in their mouth. So necessarily, it doesn't really matter if it's a frog or not. All they see from the bottom is something causing some sort of commotion, especially if there's a lot of weeds. So when I elect to fish this the cup style, there's really two situations that work the best. One is if it's really windy, and the reason why I fish it when it's windy, like I said, with that cup, it's going to spit up water, so it's going to get their attention. And it's a myth that you don't fish topwater baits when it's windy. I do it all the time. So don't not use topwater baits when it's windy. And the second reason why I like to fish these is when there's a lot of open water in between the weeds. So say there are weeds, so you still have to go with, the weedless approach here. But there's a lot of open water. And again, like the open water, it's going to attract the fish with the splash and with the noise. So when it's windy, or when there is a lot of open water in between the vegetation, then I would probably go with the cup style. So the running style, I fish completely differently. With the cup style, you can either chug it along and pause, or you can do a slow. A lot of people fish the frogs really slow like this, like bloop bloop, and then really just let it sit there until the ripples slowly disappear. It just depends on the mood, depends on the bass, depends on the situation. If it's not working going fast, then try medium. If it's not going that, then go really slow. I've had strikes on all three ways, so don't give up if it's not hitting it fast or slow. Just switch up your cadence a little bit. So with the running style frog, this is my favorite one, and you can see right off the rip that is different. There is no cup, so there's nothing splashing. What does splash and get their attention are either the legs here, or some companies go with the skirts, which basically just mimics the legs. So with these guys, I fish when there's a ton of vegetation in the water, or when there's a lot of snags, whether it's lily pads or weeds or anything green floating on the surface, algae, whatever it is. And a lot of times I throw these right on the bank, and it gets tangled in some cattails or some weeds, and the fish like to sit underneath, if you can see this, sit underneath those little ledges, and they wait for the frogs to jump in, and then boom. So a lot of times when you cast these out, let it sit there for a second, and I've caught a lot of fish not even moving the bait, just having going push, split in the water, and then all of a sudden it comes up, a reaction strike, and just nails it. So whether or not you cast it on the shore and bring it on, I like to run these guys quickly. So I'll cast it out, and when I'm kind of surveying the water, look for little pockets of open water. There will be some in most cases. And what I call those blow up holes. So this is where fish have a chance to actually see the bait, and probably in the past, it has fish have actually come up and used that little pocket of open water to strike something. So what I like to do is I like to align my cast depending on how many different blow up holes I can get on that. Maybe it's just one, maybe there's three that direction, maybe there's a couple in this direction, and I'll cast it out. And what I'll do with this one is a steady retrieve, and it will go like this. It'll go through the water, and then once I get to one of those open pockets, then I'll let it sit. And like it's still moving, it's not still. The legs are still going in the water. It's still bobbing up and down. And what the fish will do, it's actually pretty amazing. It'll track this, even though it doesn't know exactly what it is. The fish will swim underneath it while it's going on top of the vegetation. Now I've had bass in the past strike it through the vegetation. That's when you know they're really aggressive. But a lot of the times it'll follow it and it'll wait for that pocket. So you just let it sit there and wait, and then boom. Or say you have an open area from here to here. It comes through, you let it wait. If you don't get a strike, don't reel it in too quickly. Just go. Try to keep it, in that strike zone for as long as possible. And then if nothing happens, then you do the steady retrieve again and hopefully hit the next little pocket or blow up hole. So I like to use these, like I said, when there's a lot of vegetation, and definitely it's the most effective. So don't be surprised if it does hit it through the weeds. It does happen, but in most cases they will hit it when it waits, or when it just sits there. Similar to the cup frog, they do attack it once when it's moving, but in more cases than not, it will strike the frog when it's just sitting still. So when you're at the store deciding what frog to buy, what I do in every single bait, not just with frogs, I always buy a dark color and then a light color for a couple of different reasons. Sometimes you might have the right bait, but the color will trigger the fish to bite. And something that people really don't think about when fishing for a frog, a lot of times people will just look at the top of the frog and say, oh, this is black, and this one's green, and this one's brown. But you have to realize, when you flip a frog upside down, look what color its belly is. As you can see, this has a pattern. This has a pattern. They're relatively close. This is green. This is a dark brown. You flip it upside down, it's relatively close. This is all green. You flip it upside down. So you can kind of see a trend here where this is going. You flip this one upside down, there you go. Now you have the two different styles. So the majority of the time, in the daylight, even sometimes in the morning, I will go with the more realistic looking frog. In Ohio, it happens to be like this bullfrog color. Depending on where you live, kind of just match the hatch, depending on what you see in the water, what's around you. And when it gets dark, and fishing for bass at nighttime is actually really fun. And when the sun goes down, I call that, I kind of coined the phrase, the magic hour. And it's the hour where all the activity is starting to come on top. You can see the blow-ups, you can see the splashes, you can see the bait fish kind of flutter through the water. And during that time, I like to use the black frog. Now you're thinking, why would you use a black frog when the light's going down and it's getting harder to see? That sounds like it's kind of counterintuitive, you know? But again, you have to think of it in the fish perspective. So, what would be easier to see? Let me get one here that I haven't used that. So, a fish is underneath the water looking at this, okay? Over here is the sky, and the sky is a really light blue, and it's slowly getting darker. So this is going to kind of blend in with the sky. So that is going to make it harder to see. when you get a black profile or a dark brown or a dark, any sort of dark color, it's going to stick out more. See, that sticks out a little more over that white. If you bring this over here, you can see that, you know, it's kind of transparent. So that's something to look out for. Also, the bass, frogs are kind of unique. What they can trigger either a reaction strike or a hunger strike, depending on their mood, depending on how you fish them. Obviously, if you fish the running style very quickly, it's going through the water, it's going to create a reaction strike. The bass is just going to, by instinct, come up and smash the thing. If you start fishing it slow, chugging it through the water, let it sit, it's more than likely going to trigger a hunger strike. So with most, I consider this a hard bait, even though they are plastic. With most hard baits, I do not use any sort of scent because it is going on a trigger, on a reaction strike. So I don't use a scent. But for frogs, I use this. You can really use any sort of scent, and I sprinkle it right on the bottom. You can see this is why this is a little. This is a UV. This company has a UV infused in with the scent. And that can make a big difference. And when you cast it out and it's just sitting there, a lot of times the fish will just sit there and stare at it. You know, it doesn't really, it kind of wants to eat it. It kind of hasn't made up his mind. So you don't really, I don't know how fish think, but it's just sitting there, you know, deciding whether or not it's going to eat this certain frog. But if you have that scent, you have that stuff trickling down in the water, it can taste it. You know, it wants to taste more. It will come up, and like I said, they don't have hands. They can't really do anything. They'll come up and eat that because of the scent, because it's just an extra element, and it's something else you can bring to help trigger that strike. So, I get this out of here like that. Also, when you think about it, I bring this up again, the fish do not have hands, so they can't come up and feel this thing. A lot of times, just like great whites, when they come up and hit the seal, the initial hit is not the one that it's going to eat the frog or bait fish or whatever it's attacking. When it comes up, a lot of times it hits it to stun it. So if it's sitting there, it comes up and stuns it. And what the frog will do some sort of flips and get all disoriented and not know what's happening. And then that will give the time for the bass to swim around in a circle, come up, and then actually come and eat the bait. So it's really important. Now, I know frog fishing is exciting, and you might be there for an hour and not get a strike. And when it comes up, the first thing you want to do is just set the hook, because it happened, it scares you, and you go, whoosh, you know. But don't do that, okay? Wait, the most important thing when fishing a topwater frog is to wait a couple seconds for a couple different reasons. One, when it comes up to hit it, it might not be the death blow. It might be just to stun the thing. Have it flip around a couple times, then it will come back. Two, since it is coming up like a torpedo, a lot of times it doesn't get a clean, especially if you're actually moving it through the water. You know, it's trying to use a trajectory to hit this thing, but sometimes it might hit it on the side. You know, so it takes a second for him to grab this. And what you want to do, since the hookup ratio is difficult on these, so when the bass comes up and hits it, you want to take a second or two for it to kind of, you know, swallow it, get it down in its mouth. So when it goes down in there and you set the hook, that will give a really good hook set. If it comes and you set the hook right away, you'll pull it right out of its mouth. So it's really important to kind of be semi-patient. And depending on how much slack you have in your line, if the frog is really far away, say you made a really long cast and you only twitch it a couple times, then you need to reel in and set the hook. But the closer it gets, and I have had a lot of bass hit it really, really close to the bank or the boat. If it comes up close to you and you do not have a lot of slack, wait a second for it to come up and have a chance to swallow it, and then you set the hook. Oh. All right, so if you are having problems setting the hook, there's a little trick you can do. So these are called trailers, and what you can do, let me show you this here. They sell these at Bass Pro Shop, and really probably any big tackle company or different outlet where you buy the frogs. You can get these trailers, and that just gives another hook that's going to stay weedless, because it's going to go through the weeds and it's sticking up, so you're probably not going to get hung up. And if you do miss it, and that's why this is a really good frog. It's made by River and Sea, I think. So I kept missing the hook sets. No matter how long I'd wait a second, I'd wait 3 seconds, I'd wait 5 seconds. I just couldn't set the hook. But I like this frog, so I went out and I got this trailer here, and it makes a huge difference. So I would recommend that they're pretty sturdy on there. You just kind of bend these a little bit, stick them on, and there you go. And a couple other tricks. Let's see. So this is typically when you get any sort of style frog in the box, it's going to have a really long skirt, and you can see that. But what I do is I trim down the skirt to the size where I think, and I kind of drape it off. Let me see if we can put this here. I kind of drape it off like this, and that will help when this goes in the water. The bass will focus more in on the body of the bait. You still want the skirt to have the effective legs, and like I said, this will kick up the water while it's going through. So you still want to have the skirts, but you also don't want him to hit here, right around in this area, because you'll miss the strike. So a good thing to do if you have a super long skirt is just to trim it up a little bit. So this almost is like the perfect length for me. Let me see if you can see that. So it does give the effect of having legs, and but it's not too long. It's not going to interfere with anything. Another thing I've learned is these guys. Okay, these are called scum frogs. I think one of the originators of frogs, and probably one of the most popular ones too. If you go to any Walmart, you'll see these on sale. They're super affordable, and out of all these frogs, other than the lunker-hung frog, I've had the best success in the hookup ratio on these scum frogs. But there's a big problem with them. They do not weigh anything. I don't have a scale, but for me anyway, a lot of times I'm fishing from the shore, and I need a really long cast for the frogs, and that's where these come in, especially this one. But they don't weigh anything. So what I've found out is it's a little trick here. So you can actually take split shots. See if you can see this, and you can pack them in the hole here. See that? And you can put these split shots right into the bait, and it'll still float. And I have actually put in probably 7 or 8 split shots in one of these scum frogs, and you're still able to cast. You see that? So if I start loading these things in, let's see if I can do this quickly. There's 2. There's 3. This gives it like a lot more weight, and I can't tell you how big of a difference it does when you cast. And oh, it's awesome. And another thing it does, hear that? It's a rattle. And you can even add in beads that you would use, if you're fishing plastic worms in there as well. Now you got a real good rattle. And I don't know, perhaps they make topwater frogs with rattles. I have never seen one though. But this is a good way with almost any brand. You can add your own rattle, and you can add casting distance to any of these frogs, really. So that's kind of the basics of frog fishing. Like I said, cast it out, take your time. It is a little slow, but it's definitely worth it. And if you have any questions about any of these style frogs, when to use them, what colors, how how to get more accurate hook sets, any questions at all. Like always, you can find me on Twitter at Ohio_bass. You can find me on Instagram at Ohio_bass_outdoors. You can comment on this YouTube video or wherever you see it posted at Ohio Bass, or you can email my podcast at the Ohio Bass Podcast at gmail.com. And I love talking about this. I didn't cover everything, but I hopefully I covered enough for you to learn something and have the experience of learning, or having the experience of hooking a giant monster bass on a topwater frog through the vegetation, wheeling it in. You know, sometimes it has so much weeds on the fish that, I mean, it's almost like a Christmas present. You have no idea how big the fish is, and you just have to start unwrapping it with all these different weeds and everything like that. But it's so much fun. It's totally worth it. Hit me up on any of my social media platforms, and I appreciate you guys watching.